Let's take a look at one more reason to upgrade from FrameMaker 7 to FrameMaker 10. In this case, we're actually going to focus on some of the major improvements on the user interface, and especially on the workspaces in FrameMaker 10, which can be customized. FrameMaker 7.2 did not really have the equivalent to a workspace. It simply had a single document window in which you had some limited manipulation of documents, and we will take a look at that in just a moment. Here we see a typical look at FrameMaker 7.2. In this particular case, we have a book window in the upper right-hand corner, and we have one of the documents open on the left-hand side. We could actually open further documents by double-clicking on them, as I'm doing here. And let's take a look at some of the things that would be perceived as a limitation once you became used to FrameMaker 10. One of them is that a great many of the dialogues or menus in FrameMaker 7 are modal. And I'll give you an example of that. A modal dialog will actually freeze the screen and prevent you from editing text. An example would be if I wanted to insert a cross-reference. With the cross-reference, I could decide that I wanted to limit it to the current document, and perhaps I wanted to find a chapter head, for instance, to select from. But as I'm doing this, I cannot do any scrolling or any editing on my document. The screen is completely frozen. A similar case will occur with trying to create a variable. So if I decide I want to insert a variable, although I can certainly locate one like book title, I cannot scroll down to a different page. My screen once again is frozen until I complete that action. Perhaps what seems like one of the biggest limitations once you become used to FrameMaker 10, upgrading from FrameMaker 7, is the lack of freedom with your documents. I can actually resize my document if I want to, but I cannot make it leave the workspace area. In FrameMaker 7.2, you'll see that if I try to take this document and move it out of what we think of as the document window, it is simply eclipsed or cut off. So that is another one of the problems. One of the few things that you can do is under Windows you can actually tile your display, which will actually divide your documents evenly and give you a little bit of freedom, but it is somewhat limited. Now let's pause and contrast this with FrameMaker 10. Now we're taking a look at FrameMaker 10. As you can tell at a glance, the user interface looks quite different. And one of the reasons is because we're actually using a customized or modified user interface. FrameMaker 10 had a major redesign of the user interface compared to the earlier versions of FrameMaker 7. In this particular case, you have a number of workspaces to choose from, and I'm using a custom one called Max Authoring. They have some of my favorite menus placed off to the side. So we'll take a quick look at how this works. Here we can see table. There's actually a table catalog, which we did not have before. The paragraph designer, the character designer, etc. are all popping off to the side. One of the last things that I showed you in the earlier demonstration was that the FrameMaker 7.2 was quite modal and actually locked up the screen if you tried to do something like inserting a cross-reference or variable. This can now be done from a pod at the bottom of the screen. So if I actually wanted to insert a cross-reference and I located something that I wanted to make a cross-reference to, that menu will stay open. But more importantly, let's try variable. I'll actually just go ahead and insert one. You'll see that it actually has indeed inserted the variable. And while the variables are still displaying, it is possible for me to go ahead and further edit the text. So this makes it much more fluid and flexible. What I'd like to do is to actually go ahead and restore the screen display to the normal authoring workspace that comes out of the box without any modification. If you have not done any customization to your workspaces and you simply use what comes out of the box, this is what the authoring workspace would look like. We have one for authoring. We also have one for review, which we'll use in one of our later demonstrations for track changes, which is a new feature. But let's go back to authoring. And here you can see that it's showing you the paragraph catalog, the familiar character catalog, and a third catalog that FrameMaker 7 users are not used to, which is the table catalog. Down here we also have the marker window. It's possible to customize this right away by simply collapsing this menu down to icons, which will pop out like flags. Or you can actually resize this a little bit where you can actually see a label and have some idea what it's going to do. Customization begins by actually tearing menus free, as I'm doing here. Perhaps I want to have the paragraph and character menu free, the catalogs as I had earlier, and this would begin my customization. If I wanted to add something to a pod, which you saw done earlier, I would simply do that by going up to View, Pods, and I would add something, for instance, like markers. And this actually opens up a pod that collapses at the bottom of the screen, and I can actually see all of my index markers. If I were to click on any of them, it will take me straight there. Another thing to be aware of too is with any of your floating menus, whether they are menus or documents, you can simply double click like this and actually collapse them, kind of like the old window shade program in Macintosh. And some things, if we go back to our, if we resize the window, and we will conclude with my original customized workspace, one thing that I particularly like is this, and that is that when you tear a document free, as I'm doing right here, my documents have all been docked up at the top here, kind of like a browser. It's actually possible to take that document and place it outside of the workspace area, and I'm going to resize it a little bit to make sure I've got room to do that. And as I do this here, you'll see I have a document that's actually moved completely outside the workspace, giving me total freedom. This is particularly useful if you have multiple monitors, particularly if you've got some reference material, and this is a real boon to the translation industry where somebody has to look at English and foreign language versions at the same time. This concludes our demonstration. Please continue to read our 10-part blog series, and whenever you see one of these poster icons that looks like a PowerPoint slide, please click on it and you'll see yet another demonstration.